West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
President Biden is set to deliver his first address to a joint session of Congress this week and lay out his priorities to a nation still fighting a pandemic and exhausted by a string of mass shootings while coming to a reckoning on racial justice. Biden's big sell to rebuild and reinvent the nation's infrastructure. Joining me now for an exclusive interview is the man who holds the key in the Senate to whether any of that can get done, Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Thank you so much for coming in. Nice to see you with you in person.
Yeah, it's great to be in the studio again.
Yeah. So you said this week the best chance for bipartisan infrastructure is to focus on what you call conventional infrastructure, roads, bridges, water, broadband. Key Republicans introduced a proposal, $600 billion, targeted to the issues you're talking about. Do you support it?
That's a good start. It really is. And I'm glad they did it because it came out of BPW committee, which is Tom Carper's the chairman, and my colleague Shelley Capito is basically the ranking member. And they've worked it together, so we know it has bipartisan support. We just have to look to see if we've gotten everything in there that we need, and we'll be working on that together. So I'm very, very pleased with that. And this is the way we start negotiations. They've put their best foot forward, but it's a starting point. It's not the finishing line.
So you say that, and clearly there is a lot of work to do, but I want to ask kind of more of a big picture, because there seems to be a bit of a disconnect on how to define infrastructure here. President Biden has broader ambitions. He, for example, has a plan inside his big proposal that includes $400 billion for in-home care for elderly Americans and those with disabilities, also billions more for child care facilities. Do you support that?
Well, here's the thing. All the things that he has stated that's needed is needed. To what extent we have to go in that and go through the process of having our hearings and looking at a markup in a committee and then having professionals come in, going to the floor with an amendment process. By that time, you're going to have all different sides coming to agree, hopefully to agree on something. Just take what we just did last week, which was the hate crimes bill. Who would have thought we'd have gotten 94-1? Think about that. People wouldn't have expected Democrats, Republicans to be in unison on that, and we did, but it had a broad process on the floor.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. It's hard to find bipartisanship, but one would think that condemning hate crimes against Asian Americans.
You would think
and
all
others,
these things make sense,
right?
Okay.
But these are real policy.
Well, these policies here. That's
so do you think that those?
I think they should be separated.
You do.
I do think they should be separated because when you start putting so much into one bill, which we call an omnibus bill, makes it very, very difficult for the public to understand. When you talk about infrastructure, they understand infrastructure. Internet is a new infrastructure that we didn't have before, and it should be. But you're talking about transit, airports, rail systems, the lines as far as our electricity, which is the grid system. All of these things need upgraded. We have to make sure with the new energy coming on that we're able to get it to market. So all of this has to be incorporated. That's infrastructure, what we would call traditional infrastructure. The human infrastructure is something that we're very much concerned about. And when you think about all that we have done in the last year and plus the COVID bill this year, American Rescue Plan, an awful lot has been done there too. So we have to see what the effects of all that is.
So just to be clear, it sounds like you're supporting a smaller package with what you deem traditional infrastructure.
More targeted done.
And would you tackle everything else with 51 votes through the reconciliation process?
No. If people would just think about, if we go through the process that we're supposed to, we never used to use filibuster. And reconciliation is only used for budget. And that's why you have the guardrails put on with the Byrd rule. So we have to get back to getting it into the committees, let the committee chair and the members of those committees work it in jurisdictions, whichever it comes to. I'm chairman of energy projects would come to me, then we would work it, give it back to the majority leader. They put it on the floor with an open amendment process that's germane. Once you go through all of that, you know, Bob Byrd, when he was majority leader, used to keep us here Friday night, Saturday until we got it.
That was a long time ago.
Well, but still, yeah, things
different
work.
Culture.
Things work.
President Biden is going to give his first speech to Congress this week. He's going to call for higher taxes on the wealthiest Americans in order to combat poverty and expand child care. 1 in 5 children in your home state of West Virginia live in poverty. So do you think that raising taxes to help those who need it most
I think we can find a balance,
or
but when you have reports from professionals that say that $400 billion to $1 trillion not even collected in the loopholes we had, we've eviscerated the IRS. They don't have the guts or basically the firepower they had before. All of this thing should be explored before we start just raising taxes exponentially.
So you don't support raising taxes at all right now?
Oh yeah, I always support basically. I'm supporting anything that makes common sense and is reasonable. But if you're just saying raising taxes for the sake of raising taxes and not collecting what taxes have already been owed, and we're not
what
closing
if you did it
loopholes.
together?
Well, you look at everything together and make sure. And you look at basically the scope of the program of how much they want and see if that's necessary or needed.
I guess my question is, if there's somebody out there wondering if their taxes are if they're wealthy, you know, part of the half of the top 1%, wondering, are my taxes going to be raised? And looking to you, Joe Manchin, to answer that question, what's the answer?
Oh, I think that basically you will be paying your fair share if your taxes are raised, but basically have you been paying your taxes at all? The way you're able to report being in the super wealthy, or have you been able to use different pass-throughs and different bypasses or loopholes that have been in the system? We're going to close all those. We have to.
Senator, I talk to Democrats who tell me the reason President Biden's ambitious agenda is so big and so bold is because they understand history. And history shows that the president's party, if they have majorities in Congress, as he does, oftentimes lose that in the midterm elections. And that's why they have a small window to get things done they believe is possible. So they believe that you're one of the main roadblocks on getting those goals accomplished. How do you respond to that?
I'm not a roadblock at all. The best politics is good government. I can't believe that people believe that if you just do it my way, and that'll give us the momentum to get through the next election. But when you do something that everyone tags on to, and I've seen good things happen, that people voted against it, took credit for it when they went back home. We won't give this system a chance to work. I am not going to be part of blowing up this Senate of ours, or basically this democracy of ours, or the republic that we have. If we have a 51 vote threshold in the Senate, the same as the House wasn't designed to be partisan. The House was designed to be hot as a firecracker. We were designed to cool it off. And that's the founding fathers. It was a brilliant strategy they looked at. So why can't we try to make this work? If you have the violent swings every time you have a party change, then we will have no consistency whatsoever.
I want to ask you about the issue of guns. You're talking a lot about bipartisanship. You have had a bipartisan plan to expand background checks for some years. We have seen, I talked to the vice president earlier in the week. I said it was 50 mass shootings in 6 weeks. Now it's up to 60.
It's awful.
In 6 weeks. More than 90% of Americans support universal background checks. So where is the urgency on this? Shouldn't this be a really important key priority for you as somebody who wants to work across the aisle?
But every time a bill comes out, it's far in scope. We've basically took a bill way back in 2013, myself and Pat Toomey, and we worked on it and had good bipartisan support. Then we lost it right in the last week. NRA was against it. But basically, we call it common gun sense. And now we have a group working together. You've got Chris Murphy doing a great job. Chris is looking for that balance.
And is that doable? Is that balance doable right now?
I sure think it is doable that we can find common guns. You have to understand, law-abiding gun owners aren't going to loan their guns or sell their guns to strangers. But we have so many loopholes in the system. Can't we just fix what's broken?
That's what a lot of people are asking.
Well, that we do, but then we get a bill that has everything but that. It has that and a lot more. And they just can't take the common sense approach to fixing the things that are broken and then move from there.
Before I let you go,
Sure.
You crossed party lines this week. You endorsed Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski. I know she's your friend, but you disagree on a whole lot of things, from the GOP tax cut
Sure.
bill to the individual mandate, which she voted to repeal, Amy Coney Barrett. Why'd you endorse her?
Well, basically, when you have someone such as Lisa Murkowski that just this solid, I'm not saying solid, looks at the issue, not afraid to make and step out and make a decision. She's done that and done it so well over many, many years. Her and I have been friends, and we've had great conversations. And there's no gotcha moment. There's no time when she's ever basically gone just along party lines for the sake of party lines. She gives it good, strenuous thought process. And I think people like Lisa Murkowski should be in the Senate. And I'm going to support the people that I do. I don't look at the party line saying that's a barrier for me. Party line, the country is what my concern is, and having the best people to make decisions. There's so much we can do together. You just can't throw out the purpose of us being in the Senate. There's 2 senators for every state. Little Delaware, little Rhode Island, big California, big Texas, big New York.
Yep.
Why? They don't want the big person beating up on the little person. In the Senate, the minority always has input, and it has to stay that way.
It is Monday, the 26th of April of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. Oh, what a quiet weekend. Comparably so. It was so quiet, we had to make up our own news, like the Oscars. I know some people think that it is of grave import, and look, art is art, even when it's wedded with commerce. But compared to the turmoil that we experienced during the 4 years of you-know-what, the Oscars just seems like manufactured news now. I was actually a part of another manufactured imbroglio over the weekend because it's a slow news time, even though black people continue to be killed at alarming numbers by cops just coming up on them seconds after they show up. You would think that would be newsworthy, and it is. But another death from guns. It's all just very, very common now, isn't it? Now, I was involved in a Twitter imbroglio over Madison Cawthorn visiting the Eagle's Nest. Yeah, you know, Hitler's Eagle's Nest, the retreat, the top of the Bavarian Alps. Beautiful view, I gotta tell you. But it's pretty old news about Cawthorn going there. He had posted some, he was with his brother, and he posted some Facebook or Instagram announcements showing them there and, you know, smiling and calling Hitler Mein Führer or the Führer. But it was like Mein Führer. Who does that? Well, Nazi-Jugend do that. But he had recently tried to do a syntactical dodge in which people were saying, you went to Hitler's house. And he said it wasn't his house, it was a retreat. Oh, so I just made a joke about that, you know, sarcastic. It's just like, oh, you know, why do people keep lying about Hitler's house? It was the retreat. It was the retreat. And some people didn't get the sarcasm. Of course, I put the chasm in sarcasm. That's right. And it's pretty deep. At least to me. Seems rather obvious and stupid, adolescent. But that's what I do. I do it really well. Well, I don't know if I do it well, but I do it. And you can't stop me, no matter how hard I try to stop. Yes, I have been self-reflective on the matter. But anyway, something even graver occurred Just at the beginning of the weekend, had a relative, a kid, would be my grandkid's age, the oldest, 20 years old. And I didn't spend a lot of time with the kid. It's my ex-wife's, well, it'd be my sister-in-law. Would that make sense? My sister-in-law, step-grandkid? But anyway, he'd been there for family stuff. And I didn't interact with him a whole lot because he's a kid. But we did. It's still family. But he was at work at a major national chain auto supply store in Salem, Oregon. And apparently, from what I know, is that the manager was there. It was during business hours, late in the day. And they were drinking. There was a description of several non-employees, and I wondered at that. I wondered, bikers? Apparently, from what now I've been able to gather, because everybody's pretty tight-lipped, and markedly, or decidedly so, because there is a criminal investigation going on, and an OSHA investigation to boot, because, yeah, they were at work. But drinking, manager on hand, taking part, and several non-employees. My concern was like, what was that all about? Turns out to be more kids. And when I say kids, 20-year-olds or so. Kids that should not be drinking. And for some reason, guns came out. Drinking. Now let's show off our guns. I don't know if they're showing off guns. I thought, was there some sort of anger issue involved? But we don't know. Everybody's tight-lipped. But my 20-year-old grandnephew is dead, being shot. I won't go into the particulars. It's not nice. But, so the point I want to make about all of it is that compared to what we went through for the last 4 years, all the turmoil, all the uncertainty, all the bombast that just pissed us off. And in the midst of that, individuals were dying daily from gunshots, gun deaths. But because they didn't qualify for the 3 and above for mass killing, it doesn't make the news. Now, I know that the investigation is tight-lipped. The principals involved are tight-lipped. But that never stopped a journalist from following a story. But this story is just so all too common. It's not even newsworthy. Kid getting shot in the face by a gun with a bunch of other kids at a national chain auto supply store? That happens every day. So, got that going for us. I don't know how nice it is. It's tragic. Because that also comes on the heels of a report that we now see about the daughter of a writer or contributor on Raw Story. She actually writes for DC Report, which is carried by Raw Story. But her daughter was apparently killed by what is described as a stray gunshot through her window while she was at home in an apartment. And she was young, not too far from her time being an intern, and had a promotion, was getting ready to move out of that apartment. She was actually looking at other apartments closer to the beat that she would be following. So was it stray? Yeah, probably. It just happens every day. Not too newsworthy. But I think we have too many guns. And we know that. And I think there are too many bullets for those guns. And we know that. So one would think maybe the moratorium on liability laws for gun manufacturers should be lifted. One would think. Since it's the only product that has such a moratorium. Time to stop that. It's the little steps. They're going to fight us tooth and nail. Is that how it goes? Well, mixed metaphors, that's what we do here. They're going to fight us nonetheless. Every inch of the way that lifting the product liability moratorium is going to take their guns away. Oh, what a bunch of whiners. I have to tell you, I'm actually quite frightened by the civic mindedness of the opposition. They know nothing about democracy. I had a tete-a-tete with a local about how red Oregon is, and they showed me the map. Look at all that vacant land, it's red. And the only parts that are liberal are right here. This great population. Population, if more people want something, that's how democracy works, okay? But they want to destroy democracy because they can't get their way. Our votes aren't counted. Yeah, they were counted and you lost. I remember when Vladimir Putin actively involved himself to install Trump into office. And all I got from the maggots was, oh, you say he wasn't elected then? Suck it up, take it. You think you can beat him? Beat him. And we did. And what's their excuse now? It's fake. Some sort of wild conspiracy. Well, you know what? We don't have a wild conspiracy, even though you call it that. People are going to jail because of their involvement with Vladimir Putin and a few others to influence Trump's reign. So get off my back. Thank you, Joe, for, being who you are, because we're finally getting things done in spite of Joe Manchin. He's not a roadblock to building roads. Yeah, he's a wall. That's what a lot of people say. Well, I guess we're going to have to just get a $5 ladder and scale that wall. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we begin this fabulous week? Well, 12 Air Force Academy grads revolted against the superintendent's both sides' position on violent extremism. Native American lawmakers blasted Montana Governor Greg Gianforte for unilaterally scrapping a bison management plan. And despite the racial reckoning gaining momentum, state efforts have stalled on reparations. Yeah, just bury it in committee. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the Armenian Prime Minister praised Joe Biden for recognizing the Armenian genocide. And boy, are the Turks mad. And on another lonely Anzac Day, the sacrifices of Australia and New Zealand during World War I are far from forgotten. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. Down there at the right is the chat room link right by the social media scroll. Fancy that. And the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, and thank you for doing so much and everything that you do. If you would then take a look across the page near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, by the way, you will then hopefully notice the link to our Patreon page. And of course, we are in this position where even though we pull dollars out of our own wallets to keep this, little powerhouse going, we still need help from you. And we've had some loyal followers who have, sent us the equivalent of an espresso-type coffee drink once a month. And some of them who have spent quite a few cups of Joe a month and sent it our way. And then we convert those dollars into, bill-paying powers. And somehow when you pay your bills, they let you get away with so much. Like your First Amendment right to free speech. Isn't that great? Anyway, because of your generosity out there, we have been able to do this for the past 10 years. We are celebrating our 10th year anniversary this year of 24/7, 365 continuous resistance radio, as the founders originally intended so many years ago. So thank you for your generosity, and keep. So we thank you for your generosity, and we beg you to keep it up, okay? There's not only bills to pay, there's still machinery and software that we need to purchase to complete the changeover from the previous workhorses, who are still working, by the way, but we're phasing them into more pasture type, a more pasture-like life. How about that? All right, enough of that. Thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and a whole lot more. And he's a busy fellow as well, so thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that posted on Twitter and all those other social media platforms, and you know who they are. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found, and they're everywhere. Thankfully. But we're down to the W's. Don't ask me why. I just like West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It says what I mean, and it means what I say, in spite of the fact that it should have been a West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. But I didn't want to be so, trite. Okay, enough of those jokes. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, is out of the Air Force Times by Esteban Castellanos, and it is an open letter, to those powers that be. In late March, the U.S. Air Force Academy held its Department of Defense mandated extremism stand-down training to examine and eradicate extremism and white supremacy within its ranks. Superintendent Lieutenant General Richard Clark spoke of extreme ideologies on both sides, rather than confronting the unique flavor of extremism threat on display on January 6th at the U.S. Capitol. Cadets learn how to lead by the example set from their leaders, whether they lead with honor and integrity in all aspects of their lives and in moments especially of duress. And that depends on the standard of leadership that is set by people like Lieutenant General Clark. Many USAFA graduates feel the mild response to the insurrection from the Academy and its association of graduates failed to reflect these values and stands counter to everything they publicly expect of graduates. We are disappointed and feel that leadership has failed our graduates, the members they lead, and ultimately the citizens of this country. Simply put, many of our leaders are underreacting to the attack. we need them to state unequivocally that the insurrection was wrong, intolerable, and against our values and oath of service to the Constitution. They must state publicly and emphatically that those within our ranks who participate in or are sympathetic to the organizations that took part in the riot at the Capitol are not welcome in our ranks because they are supporting domestic insurrectionists and terrorists. Approximately 1 in 5 of the insurrectionists were veterans, according to the criminal charging reports. They included at least one U.S. Air Force Academy graduate. Many more veterans are sympathetic to the insurrection, espouse the lies upon which it was based, or are participants in related causes. Air Force Academy class Facebook pages and other social media sources show clear evidence that our officer corps members either do not take the threat seriously or support the underlying insurrectionist groups, many of which hold white supremacist ideologies. Where does the Academy and its AOG leadership stand on white supremacy within our ranks? Are they afraid of alienating large donors that may sympathize with the terrorist cause instead of doing the right thing? It took 26 days after the insurrection for retired Lieutenant General Michael Gould, the AOG CEO, to repudiate the insurrection after failing to do so on a video call with members the previous week. He said they made it a point that they would stay totally apolitical and that they were not going to pick sides in any of this. This unsatisfactory initial response only served to give more life to our concern. Our character was molded by the Academy, and that is why this picking sides debate hit us so hard, because the Air Force Academy and its association of graduates know better. The average American likely doesn't understand that the U.S. Air Force Academy, its related AOG, and the U.S. Air Force are distinct institutions. It's all just the Air Force. Therefore, what USAFA or the AOG say or don't say speaks on behalf of all U.S. Air Force members. The Academy's lack of strong rejection of the insurrection is, in effect, a political stance, one which undermines trust as well as good order and discipline within the ranks and the graduate community. Additionally, many of us, as service members of color and our allies, feel the insurrection was not only an assault on American democracy, but on the value of all as equal citizens in this country. We saw our government nearly overthrown after an election victory brought about in large part by people of color. Our AOG and the USAFA leadership should have come together with united strength to support Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's call for a stand down in a meaningful way. We need a forceful plan to continue this effort within the Academy and its graduate community. We cannot wait for the next constitutional crisis or extremist attack. This is personal and painful for those who have served because we fought for our Constitution and for the rights of our fellow citizens. Any more hesitation or equivocation in doing so risks losing the trust of the very Americans we have sworn to defend. And then a dozen cosigners. Brown of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Native American lawmakers criticized Montana Governor Greg Gianforte over his decision to scrap a bison management plan that would have allowed the wild animals to be restored in more areas of the state. Members of the legislator's American Indian Caucus said they should have been consulted before Gianforte canceled the plan, citing opposition from ranchers. Bison, also known as buffalo, have deep historical meaning for Plains Indian tribes that once depended on the animals for food, clothing, and other necessities. Bison were driven to near extinction by settlers in the late 1800s. It was a feature, not a bug. In fact, they used to put bugs in the blankets. And I mean, like flu bugs, smallpox, that sort of bug. Efforts to restore the animals outside of Yellowstone National Park have long met resistance from agricultural interests. Bison in sufficient numbers could compete with cattle for grazing space on public lands. Researchers also have raised worries about a disease carried by Yellowstone bison called brucellosis, although no transmissions from bison to cattle have ever been recorded. But it's out there. So we have to talk about it. And now all the ranchers believe it, and that's what they've been hanging their hat on for decades. An unproven disease, or an unproven transmission of a disease between species of animals. The bison management plan, scrapped by Gianforte, a Republican, had been in the works for almost a decade when it was adopted last year by his Democratic predecessor, Steve Bullock. Well, Gianforte said last Tuesday that he was ending the plan after state officials reached a March 22nd settlement with a property owners group that had challenged the management framework in state court. The settlement blocked wildlife officials from adopting any similar bison restoration plan for the next 10 years. We were blindsided by this administration's decision. Representative Sharon Stewart Paragoy, a Democrat from Crow Agency and Indian Caucus chairwoman, said in a statement, "We read the governor's decision in the newspaper. That's not a government-to-government relationship, and we expect better." Gianforte spokeswoman Brooke Stroik did not immediately respond to the criticism because they never do they? Earlier in the week, a group of tribes and conservation groups asked Gianforte to veto two bills that opponents say would make it more difficult to reintroduce bison to areas they once roamed. One measure would let county officials block bison reintroductions, and the other would treat bison in some instances as livestock instead of wild animals. Blackburn of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. During last summer's reckoning over racial injustice, decades-long debates about whether to offer reparations to the descendants of slaves in the U.S. finally seemed to be gaining momentum. State lawmakers in California, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, and Oregon, where Democrats control the legislators, introduced or hope to revive proposals to study the possibility. It turns out the wait for reparations will continue. The state efforts have mostly stalled, raising questions about whether they can win enough support to succeed on a wide scale. California is the only state to approve a commission to study reparations statewide and how they might work. We need a federal reparations bill, but I don't know when we'll get there, said Maryland State Delegate Juanica Fisher, a Democrat who introduced legislation there to create a reparations task force. Hopefully we will, but I think states should be accountable. Her bill received a committee hearing, but never made it any further during this year's legislative session, which ended earlier this month. It's similar in the other states. Bills that would study the possibility of statewide reparations in New Jersey, New York, and Oregon have been parked in legislative committees. Well, isn't that an old dodge? Announce you're going to do it, and then park them in legislative committees. Oregon State Senator Lou Frederick said local and state efforts, if they gain more traction, can help build support eventually for reparations on the federal level. Frederick introduced a measure that would create a task force and issue cash payments to black Oregonians who can document they are descendants of slaves. He plans on reintroducing it if it doesn't succeed this year. Though Oregon was not a slave state, its constitution explicitly barred black settlers, a provision that wasn't repealed until 1927. Many of the state's black residents had to contend with discriminatory housing and employment practices well into the 20th century, and some might say, well into the 21st as well. All right, that takes us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, dementia you won't forget. While Hollywood spends fortunes conjuring horrors to frighten us out of our seats, the prospect of losing one's mind, one's grip on reality, may trump them all. And not far behind might be watching it happen to a loved one. In Florian Zeller's The Father, we get both perspectives, that of Anthony, with Anthony Hopkins in the title role, and that of his daughter Anne, as his caregiver, played mostly by Olivia Colman. I'm not using the term perspectives lightly here. From the stage where this one originated, Anthony's deterioration isn't just documented, the entire narrative shifts to his reality, which is capriciously distorted or lucid, but always changing. There are subtle modifications in the set. Characters he perceives are different actors. Seasons aren't consistent. Is this a gimmick? To my mind, the difference between an effective dramatic technique and a gimmick is whether its contribution is both positive and imperceptibly subsumed into the project. Here, it works, thanks to an astute script and the two wonderful leads, Hopkins and Coleman, either or both of whom are on screen in almost every scene and who deserve every award they've already received or for which they've been nominated. Superb support comes from Olivia Williams, Imogene Poots, and Mark Gatiss, and it's necessary to mention the aforementioned technique. Bringing Anthony's perspective wouldn't have worked at all without some pretty amazing set design, editing, and cinematography. Films about end-of-life issues can win awards, like 2012's L'Amour, or can misfire, like last year's Capone, but they all summon emotion due to the universality of aging. The Father is movie-making at its best, but the subject matter may not make you feel better about anything other than the fact that there is movie-making this good. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
The discovery of penicillin in 1928 by Alexander Fleming was one of the greatest scientific achievements of the 20th century. It's hard to imagine a world before the development of what many consider to be miracle drugs. However, just 90 years ago, antibiotics weren't available. Thanks to antibiotics, some common illnesses such as strep throat are now easily treated, whereas in the past they often led to serious complications. Antibiotics serve an important role in keeping you and your loved ones healthy, but it's important to remember that antibiotics only treat bacterial infections. Most common infections such as colds, flu, most sore throats, bronchitis, and many sinus and ear infections are caused by viruses and do not respond to antibiotic treatment. These infections can be overcome by simply treating the symptoms and letting the illness run its course. Unfortunately, antibiotics have often been overused, resulting in decreased effectiveness and an increase in antibiotic-resistant diseases. Antibiotic resistance, or the increased ability of bacteria to survive in the presence of antibiotics, has become a major public health threat that we all need to help fight. When a person takes antibiotics, they are at risk for possibly having a bad reaction to these drugs. Some side effects can be quite serious, or even life-threatening in the case of an allergic reaction or severe diarrhea. This is why it is very important to only use antibiotics when they are absolutely needed, and not for viral infections. Talk to your healthcare professional about the best treatment for your illness. If it is caused by a virus, follow his or her recommendation for treating the symptoms. Learn more about appropriate antibiotic use and how to feel better when you don't need an antibiotic by visiting CDC's Get Smart, Know When Antibiotics Work website at cdc.gov/getsmart/community.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1944. That was the day the Army National Guard seized the Chicago property of Montgomery Ward and removed its chairman, Sewell Avery. The Chicago-based company repeatedly refused to accept a National War Labor Board order to recognize the workers' union and abide by the board-negotiated collective bargaining agreements. After refusing the second board order, President Franklin Roosevelt ordered the Army National Guard to seize the company's central mail order house, retail store, and other related properties in the city. Avery was physically carried out of his office. Wartime no-strike pledges were in effect to avoid strikes or any disruption in war production. From a distance, it looked as if the president had triumphed the cause of labor in forcefully implementing the Wagner Act. Workers of the CIO United Mail Order, Warehouse, and Retail Employees Union had walked off the job over recognition issues on April 12th. Montgomery Ward officials argued again, as they had 2 years earlier, that they were not engaged in war production, held no government contracts, and that the dispute is not one which might impede the prosecution of the war by the board's own terms. But the government feared strike activity would only spread to other industries in Chicago and elsewhere. Local Teamsters and railway brotherhoods all supported the strike and refused to handle shipments to and from Ward facilities. The CIO union agreed to end the strike on the eve of the seizure. Others in the labor movement called FDR's move a hoax and a device to break strikes and get workers back on the job without any gains. Roosevelt issued a third seizure of Ward's facilities nationwide by the end of the year. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only 61. Wait! Well, we had been considerably warmer last week, though we did have quite a spate of much cooler weather, and I wouldn't say copious amounts of rain, but a steady rain that was rejuvenating to really all the plant life and really sentient two-legged life too. Some of the four-legged ones as well. It was great. Cloudy skies early today, followed by partial clearing. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Partly cloudy overnight with lows in the upper 30s. Winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10. And then sunny tomorrow, along with a few clouds with highs in the low 70s. And then we'll be increasing in temperature throughout the week until we get to, maybe the low 80s. Upper 70s, low 80s. Overnight lows should be pretty much in the low 40s still. So chilly nights. And it doesn't look like we have much in the way of rain forecast for the next 10 days or more. We liked it, though. It was really quite lovely. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon now stand at 10,186 with 129 deceased. Those are increases in numbers since Friday, though those are not the updated totals from the weekend, but those are increased from when we reported the last totals on our Friday show, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Grass pollen is rated high right outside the window in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 33 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is high and clicked up another notch to 7. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.94 inches. Visibility is at 8 miles, and relative humidity is at 97%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world, and a lot of people just call that the Weather Underground. London is 55 and fair. Paris is 66 and sunny. Rome is 70 degrees and sunny. Kyiv is 50 and fair. Kabul is 71 with showers in the vicinity. Hong Kong is 71 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 53 and fair. Sydney, Australia is 62 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 47 degrees and fair. And New York is 48 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Abbott Demorian of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Armenia's leader is praising President Joe Biden's recognition of the deaths of 1.5 million Armenians in Ottoman Turkey as genocide, calling it a powerful step. Biden's announcement Saturday and Prime Minister Pashinyan's response came on the day that Armenians streamed to a hilltop memorial complex in the capital of Yerevan to lay flowers and mourn the victims. Armenia, on Saturday, marked the anniversary of the 1915 rounding up of some 250 Armenian intellectuals, regarded as the first step in the killings that lasted until 1923. Turkey vehemently rejects the genocide label, conceding that many died in that era, but insisting that the death toll is inflated and the deaths resulted from civil unrest. Biden's statement brought an angry response from Turkey and risks worsening relations with Washington and Ankara. Well, as I say, Turkey's just doing another Gish Gallipoli. But Pashinyan said the move reaffirms the supremacy of human rights and values in international relations. From this point of view, it's an inspiring example for all who want to build a just and tolerant international society together, he said. I highly appreciate your principled position, which is a powerful step towards the restoration of truth and historical justice, invaluable support to the descendants of the victims of the Armenian genocide, he said in a message to Biden. Turkish officials struck back immediately. We reject and denounce in the strongest terms the statement of the President of the U.S. regarding the events of 1915, made under the pressure of radical Armenian circles and anti-Turkish groups. The Turkish foreign minister sneered in a statement. I'm sorry, I just had to. Pashinyan, meanwhile, also said the recognition constitutes a security issue, especially in light of the events that took place in our region last year, referring to the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, in which Armenia ceded large swaths of territory occupied by Armenians in Azerbaijan. More than 6,000 people died in the war, and large numbers of Armenian civilians were displaced. Azerbaijan, which is supported by Turkey in the war, also criticized Biden's recognition of the genocide. While misrepresenting the events that happened 100 years ago, the failure to give a fair assessment of the genocide committed by Armenia against Azerbaijans 30 years ago is an example of bias and double standards, because everybody wants to both sides a genocide, don't they? More than 200 Azeris were killed by Armenian forces in 1992 in the town of Kajole during fighting over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. 1.5 million killed in Armenia. 200 Azerbaijanis killed when they invaded Armenia. You decide which is the genocide.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Rafe Kasert of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. On another Anzac Day turned lonesome by the global pandemic, solitary action showed all the more how the sacrifices of Australia and New Zealand during World War I are far from forgotten. While global attention turned at dawn on Sunday to the beaches of Turkey's Gallipoli, where the two emerging countries crafted a sense of nationhood from the horrors of war in April of 1915, all along the front line in Europe, small ceremonies highlighted gratitude for the so-called Anzac troops over a century after the war ended. Unable to take part in the reduced official Gallipoli ceremonies, New Zealanders Matthew Henry and Tom Letty were still there in Turkey for their own tribute at the Lone Pine Cemetery for a lost post bugle call. It was not only Australians and New Zealanders honoring their own. The people they defended do likewise too, from such famous battlegrounds as the Somme in France and Flanders Field in Belgium, some 1,700 miles west from Gallipoli, along the immense front line where Anzac troops fought. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.